Welcome back. My name is Jonah Willihnganz. I'm the director of the Stanford Storytelling Project. We are at Module 7 of this series of Storytelling in Science, and we're up to performing and recording narration. So at this point, you have created your script, you've worked on the language of it, and you've gotten yourself close to the point where you're ready to deliver it. Our temptation is often now that we have it on the page, it's fixed, we've worked it, we've honed it, is we're going to stick very close to it and we're going to read it. And we're going to read it in a way that makes it feel to our audience like we're reading a paper. So now what we want to do is take a look at a few methods that are going to help us create a delivery that feels as though we're just talking. So when people hear the piece, they don't have the sense or the experience that it's coming from a designed script. So first what we're going to do is talk about vocalizing the script. I'm going to give you a few things that will help you just in the vocal delivery. And second, we're going to do the nuts and bolts of actually recording yourself, using the microphone to get a good quality recording that will sound broadcast ready. All right, so first we go to vocalizing your script. We're going to talk about three things that are going to help you. First is the situation. So generally, as soon as people step up to a microphone, they start to speak in a way as though they're speaking to the whole world. And that often leads them to become formal or to become a little bit airy or abstract. So what you want to do is you want to imagine when you're delivering your script that you're giving this delivery to one person, somebody you know. So just as in the exercises you've been doing in class in telling your story in pairs or reading your script and getting feedback, you want to imagine that when you're giving the delivery of your piece, that it's to a single person. Sometimes you can even go so far as to say that you are confiding the story to someone. Can't wait, let's have lunch. I'm going to tell you the story, this amazing thing that I've discovered in this research I've been doing. You sit down, you have your margarita, and you begin talking. That's the kind of delivery we're after here. Just one margarita though, not several margaritas. One of the strange things about working with stories, delivering them with the voice, is that as listeners, we are incredibly attuned to the tone of your voice and how you're feeling. So even if right now I were to start to raise my voice and go like this, and all of you can hear that and will hear emotional resonance in it. The other thing about imagining that you're in a conversation is that conversations all have a rhythm or they have stages to them. So you might want to think of your story as having stages. You're going to have like an initial setup and orientation stage, and then your excitement might build as you start to get through the plot, and then it might slow down as you come to the climax. So often, and you can practice this just by listening to people tell you even a short story of something that happened to them at dinner or on a date or whatever. Listen to the rhythm of that. You want to think about your whole piece as having that kind of rhythm, a natural conversational rhythm. The second thing that is very helpful is to have a few methods for making the delivery of your speech feel natural, conversational, and spontaneous. First thing that you can do is read your script very fast and very slow. What this will do is it will begin to exercise your range. So most of the time we have kind of a medium range, and especially when we're looking at a page and reading, we tend to fall into our medium range, which is sometimes linked to our reading speed. And for some people this becomes a lot slower, and for other people it becomes a lot faster. Normally if we're working from a script, we speak too slowly, and if we're not working from a script, we speak too quickly. So if you just try to read your script, the narration portion of your script, very fast, and then read it very slow, it's like increasing your octave ranges and then settling back down into a rhythm. But you'll find that you will be more willing to speed up in places and slow down in places of emphasis. Second technique would be to try to see if there are places that you can go off script. When you do this in practice in class with your partners, or if you're able to get some feedback from somebody who's around when you're recording your piece, you may find that this works better than actually reading from the script. For other people, it won't. But for some people who get tied to the page strongly, going in segments, doing your script, performing it for the microphone and recording it in segments, and going and just stepping back from the page and actually doing what you remember on the page will give you more of that authentic feel. Last method, and probably the most important method, is follow the meaning of the sentence. So when we're reading from a script, it tends to kind of look more like this. But when we're speaking, it tends to go like this. Even right now when I'm speaking to you, my voice is modulating a lot. So when I just said a lot, there's a lot that's landing on a lot. When I'm reading, typically I don't do that. So one of the things that you can do is say, you have a sentence, the dog chased the cat, but the cat was too smart to be caught. But if I were telling you this spontaneously, I would probably say something like, the dog chased the cat, but the cat was too smart to be caught. Lots more modulation. So when you look at your script, you want to try to read it out loud as a practice, and potentially, some people like to do this in different ways, either underline or highlight or draw any other kind of diacritical marks to give you a sense of where you want to put the stress in the sentence. So here, it might be cat, it might be caught, it might be smart. Last part of vocalizing your script are remedies. Remedies are really around when you do a reading that is too slow, fast, flat, or sometimes inarticulate. When I speak to you right now, I'm conscious of pronouncing all of the consonants and the vowels. And sometimes if I flatten things out and I'm talking like this, and I'm very lazy mouth, that kind of delivery, while people around you in a live setting will understand you, on radio becomes distracting or very hard to listen to. So, the main remedy is going to be a set of exercises that you're going to do just as practice. And these exercises are first a semantic exercise. The semantic exercise is simple. This is to increase your range. It's a little bit like the range that we were talking about before. I want you to pick the word oh or ah, and I want you to, well, there'll be a handout attached to this, produce that sound, that word that has no intrinsic meaning, with about a dozen or 15 different emotional registers. So a disappointed oh, an excited oh, a surprised oh. And if you do this for about 5 minutes before, just before you do your delivery, what it does is it actually wires your brain up to be very attuned to the tone that you're using. People tend not to go too slow, too fast, be too flat, or have that kind of lazy mouth inarticulateness. So that's the first thing. It's very short. You can do it in about 5 or 10 minutes with a partner. You can even do it on your own, and I would recommend doing it on your own just before you record your narration. The other remedy is very simple. Read your script to someone who you have not read your script to, and don't allow them to see you reading the script. So sit in a way, have them sit with their back to you so that they don't know you're reading. And ask them, particularly in feedback, when does it feel spontaneous, conversational, authentic, and when does it feel like I'm just reading something to you? So sometimes when I did this in the beginning, I would have somebody raise their hand, sitting with their back to me, whenever it sounded as though I was reading something from the page rather than delivering it spontaneously. And then I would just start that sentence again, and I would keep doing it until the person never raised their hand. Second element of performing and recording your narration is actually the recording itself, working with the microphone in a room and getting a good capture of your voice. This is fairly simple, but if you don't follow a few basic principles, no matter how much work you do on your vocal delivery and how great your script is, the ultimate product is going to sound poor, and that's not what you want. So, first, the conditions. You want to make sure that you're recording in a quiet environment, and that the environment is not only quiet, but we say it's soft. It doesn't have a lot of reverberation. And what reverberation does is, even if you're very close to the microphone, it makes it sound like you're in a little bit of an echo box. We want to feel almost as though the voice is in our head when we're listening to the narrator. And that comes from the narrator being very close to the microphone, having a good microphone, which we'll be using, and having the space that the recording is occurring in not reverberate very much. You can do a couple of simple things which sound a little goofy but work. You can take a bunch of towels and you can drape them around you. I have sat in a closet with a towel over my head and done my entire narration that way, because the sound of all of the reverberation is captured right by the towel itself. And if you have some doubt about how you sound, all you need to do is record 30 seconds and then throw a towel over your head and do it again and see how much better the second one might sound. And a lot of times students will feel like, well, I had to do it in my dorm lounge. There just was nowhere else to do it. And then at the end of the quarter, when you do your final mix and everything, you've done all this work, you've done all this research, scripting, producing, you've brought in this great music, and the narration track sounds like crap. And you'll feel terrible. So even though this is very simple, don't ignore it. This one really matters to how you're going to feel about your own piece in the end. Okay. Second thing is mic placement. So I'm just going to show you a typical microphone. You want the microphone to be very close to you to get that warm, high presence. You're going to want to have the microphone be no more than 6 inches away from your mouth. Typically, you're also going to want to have the microphone be off axis. What this means is that it won't be right in front of you. You won't be speaking to it like if you watch a rock singer or something holding the microphone this way. That's not how you want to do it. Typically, you want the microphone to be a little bit below, off the axis, so not right in front here, or a little to the side, or both. The reason for this is that when you're speaking, your mouth pushes a lot of air out in the form of, particularly around P's and B's and S's. Those are called pops or sibilants. And so to avoid those coming out on the recording, if you have the microphone away from where the air is actually coming out of your mouth, it will pick up your voice just fine, but it won't register the pops and sibilants. Next, you also want to remember that when you're recording yourself and holding the microphone, don't move your hand around on the microphone as you're speaking into it. The reason for this is that the canister of the microphone will transmit that sound into the microphone. Even though these are good mics and they dampen that a bit, you often can still hear it on the tape. So when you begin recording the segment that you're working on, just keep your hands still. The last thing you want to keep in mind in terms of using the microphone is I would recommend that you test it out. The reason for this is that oftentimes if you put in the headphone, even in one ear, and you just try reading the first minute of your script, you may hear something that you're totally unaware of, that your conscious mind is not paying attention to. So for example, if I'm wearing a very loud clicking wristwatch and I'm holding the microphone like this, and in between my words there are little tick, tick, tick sounds, I may not be able to hear that while I'm just without headphones and just talking, but I would hear it being picked up by the microphone. So at least in the beginning, do a little bit of test recording, and then you can remove the headphones. If you're comfortable with it, I'd leave them in. The third thing we're going to talk about is working in segments. If you try to do a full run of your entire piece in one go, typically the voice will get tired and we'll hear that. So what I would do is I would take pauses. I would do, let's say the first quarter of the script, and then have some water, take a break, then do the next quarter. It will also help you not become distracted with the microphone, because sometimes if you're working with the microphone and you're doing just fine, but you've been recording for 10 minutes, the mic tends to drift and it'll start coming down. And then you'll notice that when you're mixing your piece, the volume at the beginning is a lot louder than the volume at the end, or the presence is a lot stronger. And finally, the last thing that you want to keep in mind in recording your narration is when you're done, in the exact position that you're in, you want to record room tone. Even if your room sounds totally quiet, you're sitting in your closet with a towel over your head, that space has a sonic signature that we hear. Absolute silence, the lack of sound in a mix, is completely different than an open mic on a silent scene. So those 60 seconds that you capture is something that when you edit your audio, you may be able to run underneath the entire audio by duplicating that room tone all the way across the piece. And then when you have edits between your voice and another voice, or your voice and music, instead of there being this little distracting, absolute zero sound gap, there will be this room tone running underneath. So the last thing that I have to say about for this module is just an old piece of advice. When you're working on your vocal delivery, breathe. Usually not in the first minute or two, but within a few minutes. The voice will become thinner, the voice will become a little strained. So in the segments that you're doing, do a lot of breathing in between, but even as you're doing your delivery, take real breaths in between your sentences. All right, so that concludes Module 7.